Basically, by the end of this year, it's withstood court scrutiny so far, but I fear that we're heading towards a real clash between, you mentioned, various social media platforms rat-fucking our kids' minds, becoming incredibly addictive, and the First Amendment and free speech, which I know you also care a great deal about. And how do we deal with this? We have not done anything to deal with it. We've just been like, it's partisan. This side's for me and that side's for me. Forget all of that.
What's up, everyone? In this one, Bill Maher dives into the media silos, political blind spots, and the stark reality of modern platforms in this explosive exchange. This time, he puts MSNBC's hosts under the spotlight, exposing flawed narratives and missed opportunities in Democratic strategies. If you're here for bold takes and unapologetic critiques, you are in for a ride. Let's break down this fiery conversation that leaves no side unscathed. Let's get into it.
All right, do the Democrats need a social media platform, this is for you, John, of their own to combat the Republican influence on Twitter? Well, I mean, I don't know, but Twitter, it's funny, it used to be completely left. Then Elon said, I'm going to take it over, so it's going to be 50-50 right down the middle. He didn't do that. It just switched completely. So I don't know. It's terrible that I think that we have our own media silos. We need places where, like this show, but there's not enough of them, where everybody comes and everybody hears everybody else from all points of view.
Let's stop pretending legacy media ever wanted all points of view. MSNBC, claiming to be open to dialogue, is rich when they spend their airtime parroting the same tired talking points. Bill Maher is spot on here. True engagement isn't happening in these echo chambers anymore.
I'd like to steal a line from Dave Chappelle, who said at some point how he doesn't know very much about what goes on Twitter because he doesn't go on Twitter because Twitter's not a real place. That's sort of how I feel about Twitter. And Twitter, not only is Twitter not a real place, but it's become a toxic cesspool filled with nothing, not about right, it's not about conservative, it's just filled with misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories. So I would rather not have the left replicate that if that's what's required. I think the deeper question that the question's getting at is that if you look at the data in this election, the amount of reach of all of these alternative, I'm talking about the whole podcast space mostly, but also social media, the interviews that Trump did, not starting with Rogan, but Theo Vaughn and all of these other things he did, incredible reach compared to old mainstream media, right? Where, you know, the number of people that Kamala Harris reached by going and talk to Brett Baer is a tiny fraction of, if you look at the average, not just the number of downloads, but then the social media plays on YouTube and other places that Trump did by hitting all of those mostly bro-friendly, skewing young male podcast platforms. I think the issue is not so much that the left, quote, needs a platform. There are a bunch of people on, Harris went on Call Her Daddy, right? All the Smoke, a few of those things. What the left has to, what Democrats have to figure out is the fact that the way to talk to voters who are not our age, and the large swelling number of the segment of young voters and middle-aged voters, is that they have to start talking to them on platforms that are not 60 Minutes, and Fox News or MSNBC or any of these, I hate to say it, dying legacy media platforms.
He is right to call out the absurdity here. Democrats are still acting like MSNBC and CNN carry the weight they did decades ago. Meanwhile, Republicans have figured out that modern voters demand authenticity, something legacy media rarely delivers.
When the way to reach the growing parts of the electorate is through...
But isn't that another way of saying that Twitter is real? Well, the internet is real. Somebody just wrote a big article about this. Like, well, that is where reality is now, and this is perfect for the movie you're going to do. No, really, this is exactly. I hope you're taking notes.
I'm taking notes. I'm taking
notes. In the place of bipartisan agreement, remember, Congress actually passed a ban, so to speak, that TikTok has to divest from China, for instance. Basically, by the end of this year, it's withstood court scrutiny so far, but I fear that we're heading towards a real clash between, you mentioned, various social media platforms rat-fucking our kids' minds, becoming incredibly addictive, and the First Amendment and free speech, which I know you also care a great deal about. And how do we deal with this? We have not done anything to deal with it. We've just been like, it's partisan. This side's for me and that side's for me. Forget all of that. The problem is that we have kids committing suicide because they're on these social media platforms and AI that's talking back to them and they think it's a person.
Right, yeah.
Those are their relationships.
Those are their relationships. Yeah, Who might emerge as the strongest Democratic opposition leader in the next Trump era? Oh, well, that's a good question. I mean, like Adam Schiff, he won, right, big. And
He went, but I like Westmore.
Westmore's fantastic. He's in Maryland.
Yep.
But who's going to be the one? Gavin Newsom, we have here in this state. He's already like called the legislature to.
I mean,
Trump hasn't done anything yet, but I understand the.
This was the problem. You know, there was a 2014 study that showed that Fortune 500 companies were more likely to pick a female CEO if the company was struggling, basically setting women up for the big job, but to also fail. If they did well, fine. But if they failed, like, look, we have a female CEO while failing. And that's what I feel like they did to Kamala Harris. When Biden refused to step aside and not run again, he was supposed to be that bridge. He backed off on that promise due to arrogance. And then he drops out after a catastrophic debate performance, and they set Kamala Harris up to fail. That was a 3-month campaign, and she was supposed to introduce herself to the American people.
This is a brutal truth. Harris was thrown into a no-win situation with no time to build credibility. Blaming her for the fallout is convenient, but the failure lies in the Democratic strategy, or lack thereof.
Well, no wonder people were Googling, did Joe Biden drop out? And so...
No. No. You're saying 3 months wasn't long enough?
I mean,
It was too long.
I mean, it was long enough.
It was long enough.
if they had a primary...
It's not that they didn't have time to introduce. They met someone and they didn't like them.
If they had a primary, they wouldn't have picked her. And if they had,
That's
she would have been
different.
able to
Yes.
rough out those edges that then she basically has to start from scratch with a campaign team she didn't hire that didn't like her, right? It was his team. And so I wonder if that next Democratic person, maybe someone's not even on our radar yet. Because frankly, when you look at the history of who's, there's two types. The one who waited in line, who was next in line, and then there's the one who comes out. That's Obama, that's Clinton, that's Reagan to some extent.
We had a strong bench. There's a very strong bench. There's a number of people that could be possibilities.
You're talking about people like Josh Shapiro, who could have been the vice president
Senator
and won
from Connecticut.
Pennsylvania.
Senator
Blumenthal?
No.
Oh,
Chris
Murphy.
Chris Murphy.
Yeah.
I want to side with Sarah about this one thing. If you're the sitting vice president for a president who has, throughout his entire term in office, been sitting at about somewhere between a 35 and 40% approval rating. People view the Biden administration as a failure. We can have a long discussion about whether they are right about that, about the economy, but the perceptions of the economy were that people thought inflation was too high, people thought we were on the wrong track, 75% wrong track numbers, and this huge inflation overhang. You're the sitting vice president, and you get put on elevated to the top of the ticket 107 days ahead of the election.
This is a recipe for disaster. No candidate, regardless of skill, could succeed in such a chaotic scenario. The Democrats' mismanagement here set up Harris and the party for failure.
I think that is a very high degree of difficulty put on anybody. And I do not think she is the perfect candidate. I tend to agree with Sarah that probably in a fully litigated primary, she probably would not have been the Democratic nominee, but we'll never know that. But I will tell you that, there's never been anybody who's had the difficulty of that situation, elevated that late in the campaign. Why?
A Democrat would have needed to run away from
Bill,
the
I don't know
Biden
if you know this, but the vice
administration.
president of the United
How
States is
she supposed to do
basically
that?
shoved in a broom closet for 3.5 years.
I know.
You couldn't.
She was more popular in there.
Yes, well.
I mean, this idea that in a mass media age, that 107 days is not long enough to know somebody.
You are way overestimating the American people in terms of what their ability.
No.
You have someone like Donald Trump has become a universally known, understood, loved by some, hated by others over the course of being omnipresent for 8 years.
Decades.
Okay.
Barack Obama becomes president of the United States after running for 2 years as president, runs a 50-state primary, is on television, does dozens of Democratic debates, and by the time at the end of that, most people knew who he was. Most people. Yeah. You drop somebody into the middle of the top of the ticket, 3 days out, 3 months out. You are going to have to spend a lot of time trying to introduce yourself to the country while also being in a steel cage death match with Donald Trump.
Okay, but I don't know if you ever watched this show, but I had Michael Douglas on this week.
Yeah.
At the top, we were talking about this, and he made a very good point that every other country in the world can do it in months, sometimes weeks. Why can every other country do it in that short a period of time? Are they all that so much brighter than America? I don't think so.
This jab at the American election system cuts deep. The reality is our bloated, expensive campaigns prioritize money over ideas. Shorter elections? Sure, but only if the establishment is willing to give up their grip on the endless cash flow.
Well,
Mostly parliamentary. I mean, there's like literal reasons, right? We don't have a
But it's
parliamentary
the-
system.
I mean,
we also have a First Amendment.
You-
we don't make people campaign this whole time. The American people want to give them $20, and so they can afford it. I mean, small dollar donors are arguably the worst thing that's happened to our politics, as it turned out.
It's a small dollar donor didn't make $20 billion. No.
A lot of it.
some of it, yeah.
A lot of it. And they represent about 2% of our country.
There's a few special PACs in there that saw $100 million
those
plus.
are bad too.
I think you can believe that you could have shorter elections in America, but it's not like we don't know. In Britain, for instance, when you have a short election, it's not like you don't know who the leader of the party is for months and years before that.
But you're either the person who's Googling the day before, did Biden drop out, or you know in a week. You know, did anyone in this audience not know enough about Kamala Harris pretty much after a week to make a decision? No. Yeah, you just people.
How are
It's
you gonna enforce
ridiculous.
that?
We just get sicker of them.
What? So
How are you going to tell people
they
they
say
can't
the
talk
same
about
stupid-
politics?
What?
How with free speech that I know you love?
Yeah.
How are you going to limit people's ability to run for office?
I'm not limiting. We're
There
not
to
making a
reduce the
law.
amount of
Bill, are
money?
you-
Isn't there somehow
of
ability
course.
to reduce the amount of money involved
Get
in
rid
politics?
of super PACs by making it
Oh.
no limits, full disclosure. 24-hour disclosure.
We could
should
fix
have
democracy in a
instant
minute. Get rid of gerrymandering. Get rid of money in politics. Get
Wait, get rid of it.
Get
You're not
rid of
gonna
the
get rid of
Electoral
it. It's
College.
water.
Classic fantasy talk. The left is great at throwing out these solutions without addressing the core issue. Their policies aren't connecting with enough voters. The system isn't broken, their strategy is. You don't change the rules when you can't win, you change your game.
No, none of that is. We're going to keep working with this constipated system that we live with.
This clip perfectly illustrates why Bill Maher continues to stand out. He doesn't shy away from calling out both sides, but here MSNBC gets dragged for its lack of interception. Democrats better start innovating instead of pointing fingers, or they'll keep getting outplayed by Republicans who've mastered the art of modern engagement. Agree or not, Maher exposes a critical truth. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts or opinions down in the comments below. If you agree or disagree with a lot of the points made here, this is a place for discussion. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe, really helps out the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next one.